The first pre-Club World Cup mini transfer window has come and gone with very little activity for Aston Villa, and I don't profess to have any inside intel on what the club plans to do this summer. And 80% of all the rumors out there are bogus, but some aren't. And as Colonel Hans Landa once said in Quentin Tarantino's masterpiece Inglourious Bastards, I love rumors. Facts can be so misleading, but rumors are often revealing. And that's because when you put them all together, there are trends and themes that we can explore. Now, I do profess to have some inside intel on Aston Villa's financial situation, and surprise, surprise, it is contrary to the narrative that's being peddled out there. Presented by 24/7 Services, it's the Holy Trinity Show's Summer Transfer Strategic Show. Welcome inside the parlor. Hernia surgery done. And umbilical hernias, when they flare up, are really uncomfortable. So to get the surgery out of the way and to be pain-free, a week later, a huge relief, because I love the summer, the sunshine, the rumors, the speculation, the strategy, financial creativity. We've apparently already made a signing. I'll talk about that later. What I dislike is the clickbaity and even mainstream media reporting that Aston Villa is in dire circumstances with PSR because we didn't qualify for Champions League next year. This is usually how it's positioned. Failure to qualify for Champions League forces Aston Villa, or clubs aim to capitalize on Aston Villa's PSR crunch. You know, the more negative, the more fear-based the headline, the higher the click-through rate, if you haven't figured that out by now. So last week, completely out of the blue, I get a private message from someone with intimate knowledge of Villa's financial situation, someone from within the club itself, and you would know who this person is, but I'm not going to say the name for obvious reasons. And I quote, "The biggest miss out there is the FFP PSR reality. Everyone, I repeat, everyone has this completely wrong." And I'm not surprised, mostly irritated and annoyed by media in general, but this does lead to a very interesting strategic question, one I posed recently. Is there an advantage for Aston Villa to not clarify the prophesized PSR doom and gloom? Like, if a buying club comes to Villa, Monchi's just going to say, hey, we don't have a compliance problem, don't try to lowball us, or we won't do business with you. If you're selling, on the other hand, and let's say it's a really popular player and the decision won't go over well with fans, well, you have a built-in excuse. PSR, because Villa could end all the speculation by simply putting out a statement, couldn't they? Aston Villa should sell its players, even the high-profile ones, because that's what intelligent clubs do. PSR simply means we have to be compliant based on a 3-year rolling average by fiscal year end, which for us is the end of June. But any club with ambition and strategy is going to treat its players like a side of beef hanging in the butcher shop. And when that beef reaches prime and it has reached its maximum age, you got to move it before it goes off. Villa's current reality is they have a number of key players all reaching that inflection point of age versus value. And I'm sure the idea of gutting the entire core all at once this summer would unsettle a lot of fans, not to mention probably some of the people in the footballing department. But what really matters is, has Villa identified players that they think can truly be as good or better, plus younger, and at an appropriate valuation? This is my gut feeling based on what I've seen already. 60 to about 75% of all of Aston Villa's summer business is already well down the line. We are in the process as we speak, and it probably has been in the process for a while. And Monchi has his short list ranging from the very ambitious on down, so he'll already know what chances we have based on conversations and roughly the transfer hit and the wage bill. The The remaining 30 to 25% of any business this summer will come from unplanned or surprise opportunities in the market, maybe a distress sale, for example. We'll know for sure by June 30th what the situation actually is, and if we sell, say, a Buendia or a Bailey or both, we'll know that we were not quite compliant. But if we are, there is no point in selling anybody until after July 1st when we can start working on next year's books, because next year, the disastrous 2022-2023 season falls off the 3-year rolling average. And I'll bet Aston Villa has somebody in the finance department, we call them capologists here in North America, to keep track of our situation down to the penny so we can push the envelope to its very max. That's what we should be doing if we're an ambitious and aggressive club. The reason why we should all be so excited is because Unai Emery is so crystal clear on the criteria and profile of a player in every single position down to minute details that it makes Monchi's job that much easier, not to mention his proven track record of appreciating the performance and transfer value of all those players. Plus, he has his own scouting instincts. No better example than Morgan Rogers, who we bought as a 21-year-old for a maximum of 16 million. Well, what's he worth now? And he's getting peddled around in all the rumors. The conversation starts between 50 and 75 million, and that's just after 18 months. So Emery has the criteria. Monchi is tasked with going out and finding it through his scouting networks, through technology like AI. They could have 100 names per position that they then whittle down to a realistically negotiable short list of candidates. And this is all being built around Unai Emery's brain. So it's a reversal of what they had at Sevilla, where Monchi is supporting the manager. And I can't think of another club right now that is operating this way, but it's designed to give us more transfer hits than misses. Can you name one permanent signing that has failed to deliver under Unai Emery? Maybe Alex Moreno, who came in halfway through that first season, helped us qualify for Conference League, and that was when Unai Emery was on his own recruitment-wise. A bunch of Premier League and Spanish teams in on Alex Moreno could get as much as $5 million for him, plus wiping his wages off the books. But we can agree, Yuri Tielemans as a free signing. What a player. Pau Torres, Moussa Diaby, Morgan Rogers, and now Onana and Matson, who have shown us many glimpses. They're on the cusp of breaking through. It's largely been the loaned players who have been inconsistent. I'm thinking of Nicolo Zaniolo, Clement Longley, even Axel Dessassi, but there's less risk because they're being loaned. On the other hand, Marco Asensio and Marcus Rashford were fantastic loan signings this winter, even though there was a lot of media noise around Marcus Rashford's attitude and his salary, which our footballing department thankfully ignored, did their own due diligence, and like everything else, they've made consistently good recruitment decisions, and now, today, they are in full flow as a team. So what are some of the common themes among Villa's links, whether they are concrete or rumored? Well, youth is a big one. I mean, we've been associated with players as young as 18 and right up to that de-risked age of about 23, and many of those are youth internationals, but with the pedigree to potentially go full international, something Unai Emery enjoys helping out with. The latest example is 18-year-old Stoke central midfielder Saul Sabide. This is a very Morgan Rogers feeling idea because at 18, the kid is articulate, intelligent, well-spoken. I mean, he talks like a full-fledged pro. I'm sure you've noticed this, but the positions we keep getting linked with are goalkeepers, both backup and starting, right-footed center backs, the latest, 24-year-old Federico Gotti at Juventus, and 31-year-old Kosovo international Amir Rahmani at Napoli. We've also been linked with lots of strikers. Oddly, no right backs, and it wouldn't be a summer window if we weren't connected with at least one crafty number 10 type who could break lines and low blocks. On that front, how long before we're seriously linked to Joao Felix again this summer? How many times will Villa be spurned at the altar before they turn their affection to somebody else? And that somebody else could be Marco Asensio, who Unai Emery has coveted for a long time. And, you know, his overhead won't be high, his experience is valuable, and he's de-risked because we've seen what he can provide for us apart from penalties. I'm still trying to figure out in my gut whether this is going to be a busy, bordering on overhaul type window or just a tinkering type summer? Because the one glaring number I see is our average starting team age from last year, 29.2. Only Man City, Everton, and West Ham were older on average in their starting teams. Our average squad age is 28. That's just too high. PSG, on the other hand, Champions League winners, 23.6. And okay, they spent a boatload to assemble that team of young stars, but it does prove that with the right kids, maybe you can win things. With Villa's aging core, talking about Ollie Watkins, Emi Martinez, Luca Dean, and John McGinn, the cold, hard question the footballing department has to ask itself is, can those players have a better season for us than they did last year? And in the case of Luca Dean, that would be difficult because he was excellent for us last year. Ollie Watkins, as much as we want him to have a 20-goal Premier League season based on his very consistent numbers over the past 3 years, that would be difficult to achieve. The problem is, what will it cost to get a proven 20-goal scoring Premier League striker? Because there's no guarantee that a Yorkayesh or an Ugo Ekitike could even score 20 goals in the Premier League right out of the gates. Martinez could have a better year next year because this last one wasn't great, which I routinely attribute to the lack of competition within the Villa camp, which is an impossible situation to solve. And if we're being ice cold, there's also a case to be made for doing the John McGinn to Celtic deal this summer. We all know he wants to end up there eventually. Doing it this year would get us a higher transfer fee. The question is, can we replace his ingredients, combativeness, competitiveness, leadership, character? Those have been key ingredients for Unai Emery. Are they irreplaceable? As Aston Villa found out the hard way this season, footballing fortunes can come down to premature whistles and fine lines. Like these, painted by 24/7 Services at a parcel hub in Smithwick. I'm strangely fascinated by this show's sponsors' breadth and scope of services. I mean, somewhere there's probably a manual that says these lines have to be painted at this precise width and with this precise color. I've been showing you this dramatic home renovation in Lichfield recently. Well, this is Holy Trinity show viewer James Burns' crib. And look at the transformation and now this new viewing setup. I just have to change one thing here. Much better. James is now a repeat customer of 24/7 Services, which comes down to trust. So from fine lines to fine finishing, you can get your project started by visiting their website or by calling the numbers in the description of this video. Back to Emi Martinez, and contrary to what his wife is saying, Fabrizio Romano reported that it's Emi Martinez who wants a change of scenery. The latest link is with Galatasaray. Now, does that have something to do with the World Cup now being less than a year away and him wanting to refocus? The persistent links to Manchester United would be quite a story given how his Villa career might have ended there. And because we're linked to Garnacho and Sancho and Rashford, that reeks of a swap potential. But if he wants to go and play in big games and win trophies in Europe, he should go to Napoli, because they love their Argentine legends there. That stadium even feels a little bit Argentine, doesn't it? Like El Monumental. I'll tell you what, though, I wouldn't miss losing sleep over every international window with those long flights and hostile games. We've been linked with a few goalkeepers over the last few weeks, none of whom are backups. Lille's Lucas Chevalier and Nice's giant Polish international Marcin Bulka are the latest and most persistent. I mean, Chevalier is a blue chipper at 23. At the same age, Martinez was splitting time between Arsenal's U23s and Getafe. So this is a guy who is among Europe's elite, in the France squad, but not a regular starter, which suits us. And I watched Lille a few times in the Champions League. The guy stood on his head in a few of those games. He is a battling goalkeeper. The reason why you'd hang on to the world's number one at 32 years of age and on 150K per week is to win the big, high-profile games like an FA Cup semi-final or a Champions League quarterfinal. And unfortunately for our Debu, he was out-goal-kept in all three of those games. When you think back to the goals allowed in those three games, it was Donnarumma who helped his team ultimately advance to the semi-final. And Dean Henderson, although having our number, is significantly younger and on a lower ticket. I've seen a lot of experts say you cannot replace Emi Martinez. Those same experts said the same thing about Jack Grealish. I'm not going to get dragged into the Grealish debate because honestly, I find this the easiest and laziest, clickbaitiest topic of all time. Remember, sequels are never as good as the original. And yes, Villa boy Jack is comfortable with the ball at his feet under pressure. That's a great trait to have. But the age is high. The wage is higher. The return of good time party Jack is a risk. I just don't feel that our group is the sentimental type right now. And if we were to even consider this, it might be at the expense of Jacob Ramsey, who in my heart of hearts, I just feel is on the cusp of taking that next big step. I said earlier how links to high potential youth has been a theme already leading up to the window. Most notable, Sverre Nipan at Rosenborg BK, until the City Group came along and said, "We'll have you, son." And is that because Villa didn't qualify for the Champions League, as Fabrizio Romano claimed? Because his life will probably start in the City Group with Girona, and they're not playing Champions League. Or was it Erling Haaland whispering in his ear? One thing I'm interested to see is whether or not someone from within our own system graduates to the preseason camp this summer, maybe sticks around for later friendlies like Lamar Bogard did last year. I'm thinking specifically of Rory Wilson, only because we just extended him recently after kind of an acrimonious time. Maybe Unai Emery will invite the very young and raw Colombian left-footed center back Yeimar Mosquera, and there's another left-footed center back that's making waves within football, and that's a guy we signed last winter, Yasin Özcan. The young Turk signed at only 19 years of age, completely under the radar in the winter, and then continued being a dependable member of his Turkish Super League team, which made him honorary captain on his final day, and now he's been called up to Turkey's senior national team. Are we looking at a Danny Hausen-like young star who's ready to play in the Premier League? And I know we re-signed, very appropriately, Tyrone Mings, apparently on a very good deal. But you know our group, they have a hoarding problem with left-footed center backs. Along with Bailey and Buendia, another high-priority to-do list item for Outgoings this summer has to be Coutinho and Dendoncker. I was wrong about their contracts. I thought they were expiring this June, and they should be. Two of the worst contracts in the history of this football club when you consider the contributions versus the cost, like a bad parting gift from the Gerard Purslow era. Wiping off $225,000 per week has to be the priority, because we're never getting a transfer fee for either, and it sounds like Phil is open to a mutual termination. UEFA's wage ratio regulations is probably going to cost Aston Villa a fine, and they'll happily pay that in pursuit of keeping up with the Joneses, but this is why I could see, unless he does a similar deal to Tyrone Mings, I could see Luca Dean moving on this summer. I mean, he's 32 in July on $120K per week. And if you combine Luca Dean with Phil Coutinho, Dendoncker, Bailey, and Buendia, that's an astonishing $550,000 per week in wages and an average age of 29.8 among them as fringe players or non-existent players in some cases. So this is housekeeping maintenance that needs to be done for both sporting and financial reasons. Ollie Watkins will be one to watch because of his age and value and the fact that he has suitors, supposedly. Physically, he's more like a 25-year-old than a soon-to-be 30-year-old, so he still has lots of football left in him. The problem will be replacing his goal contributions, both goals and assists, which have been very consistent over the last 3 years. And I don't think we are shopping in the Ugo Ekitike or Victor Yorkayesh aisles, but we have been linked for several windows now with Porto's 21-year-old sensation, Samu Agahawa. Big ticket, big lad, 6'3", and if we were to sign him, that would be as a replacement, not as a supplemental signing. A supposed recent recruit on a very longer-term plan is 18-year-old Zepicano Redmond from the Feyenoord youth system. Any player who's named after a character in City of God is interesting to me. But this is a guy we signed for no transfer fee and put on a 4-year deal, so very low risk, probably going to start his life in our youth setup or possibly on loan. But when you watch his highlights, he shows incredibly mature decision-making abilities. And he worked directly with Robin van Persie Percy and scored a boatload of goals in Feyenoord's youth system as both a striker and a right winger. And then we're going to move on from Kane Kessler-Hayden this summer to a championship team for a modest fee. And Enzo Berenacea's year with Valencia has drastically increased his value, which was a bit of a surprise. So we have no shortage of assets, including some in our youth system. On that note, a couple of very highly touted young players from years ago were just released by the club. Kyrie Pierre and Rico Richards, among others, which just goes to show high potential in the door does not necessarily mean future Premier Leaguer, although Richards just signed with Port Vale. And so to bring it all back around and summarize, based on all the links so far, whether bogus or concrete, we are prioritizing goalkeepers, a right-footed center back and a striker, and we are targeting high-potential young players. And I'm all for it, because 29 years as an average age is too high in the Premier League, in my opinion. Only question is, how many of our aging core are we moving on? And are we moving them on because of sporting reasons or financial reasons? Well, according to my source, the PSR situation is not as dire as it's being made out to be. Until next time, hopefully an actual signing, enjoy the sunshine. And as always, up the mighty Villa.